I never thought I'd be sitting in a lawyer's office at 45, listening to my own father essentially disown me. The mahogany desk between us felt like a canyon as Mr. Henderson read Dad's will with the enthusiasm of someone ordering coffee. To my daughter, Sarah, I leave the entirety of Broken Creek Ranch, including all livestock equipment and property rights. My sister sat beside me, her face a mask I couldn't read. 20 years of working that land, bleeding into that soil, and it all went to someone who'd spent the last decade in the city, visiting twice a year for Christmas and Dad's birthday. The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. The decision wasn't made lightly, Henderson continued, adjusting his glasses. Your father left specific instructions that you, Jake, are to receive a one-time payment of $50,000 and are asked to walk away from the ranch entirely. Walk away. From the place where I'd learned to ride before I could properly walk. From the barn I'd helped rebuild after the tornado of '98. From the pastures where I'd spent countless dawns checking on newborn calves. My hands, scarred from barbed wire and honest work, clenched into fists. There's more, Henderson said, his voice softer now. Your father wrote you a personal letter. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. Dad's handwriting, shaky from his final months, spelled out my name. Inside, just a few lines. Son, sometimes the hardest thing to do is the right thing. Trust me on this. The ranch needs to stay in the family, and Sarah's the only one who can keep it safe now. I'm sorry. Safe from what? That question would haunt me for months. Sarah and I didn't speak until we reached the parking lot. The Oklahoma sun beat down mercilessly, making the asphalt shimmer like water. She leaned against her pristine white SUV, city car, I noted bitterly, while I stood by my dusty pickup truck, the one Dad had helped me buy 15 years ago. You knew, I said finally. It wasn't a question. She nodded slowly, her auburn hair catching the light. Dad told me 6 months ago. He made me promise not to say anything until after the reading. 6 months. The betrayal cut deeper. You've known for 6 months that I was going to lose everything, and you said nothing. Jake, listen. No, you listen. My voice rose, and I didn't care who heard. I've given my entire adult life to that ranch. While you were off playing lawyer in Tulsa, I was fixing fences, birthing calves, and sitting up all night with Dad when the cancer got bad. And this is what I get? Sarah's composure cracked slightly. You think this is what I wanted? You think I asked for this responsibility? Responsibility? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's what you call inheriting $1 million property? Poor you. There are things you don't understand. Then explain them. I slammed my hand against my truck's hood. Explain to me why 20 years of loyalty means nothing. Explain why Dad looked me in the eye every day for the last year and never said a word about cutting me out. She was quiet for a long moment, studying her manicured nails. When she finally looked up, there were tears in her eyes. Because he was protecting you from something you're not ready to handle. From what? From the truth about what our family really is. Packing 20 years of your life into the back of a pickup truck is a humbling experience. I moved through the small foreman's house I'd called home since Dad promoted me from ranch hand to manager, trying to decide what mattered enough to take with me. The rest would stay with the property, just like everything else I'd built here. Mom's old quilt went in first, the one she'd made before the cancer took her when I was 12. Dad's worn copy of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, dog-eared from our shared reading sessions during long winter evenings. A framed photo of me and Dad at last year's cattle auction, both of us grinning like fools after getting top dollar for our prize bull. The hardest part was walking through the barn one last time. Midnight, our oldest mare, whinnied softly when she saw me. I'd delivered her first foal. Stayed up 3 nights straight when she nearly died from colic 2 summers back. Now someone else would brush her coat, check her hooves, whisper reassurances during thunderstorms. You taking care of yourself, old girl? I murmured, stroking her neck. She nuzzled my shoulder like she always did, looking for the apple slices I usually carried. I'd forgotten to bring any. One more small failure to add to the list. The cattle were gathered in the far pasture, black dots against the golden grass. I'd named most of them, knew their temperaments, their bloodlines, their stories. They'd been my responsibility, my pride. Now they belonged to someone who saw them as assets on a balance sheet. As I drove away, I caught sight of Sarah in my rearview mirror. She was standing on the porch of the main house watching me leave. For a moment, I thought about stopping, about demanding answers. Instead, I pressed harder on the accelerator and didn't look back. 3 months later, I was living in a studio apartment above Mel's Diner in Broken Arrow, working construction for half what I'd made managing the ranch. The $50,000 from Dad's will was disappearing faster than I'd expected. First month's rent, security deposits, work clothes, and too many nights drowning my sorrows at Murphy's bar down the street. The apartment was a shoebox with thin walls and a view of the parking lot behind the hardware store. At night, I could hear Mrs. Patterson's television through the wall and the rumble of 18-wheelers on the highway. It was nothing like the peaceful silence of the ranch, where the only sounds were wind through wheat and the distant lowing of cattle. I'd tried calling Sarah twice. Both times her voicemail picked up, and both times I hung up without leaving a message. What was I supposed to say? That I was sorry for walking away angry? That I needed to understand what she meant about protecting me? That I missed home so much it felt like a physical ache? The construction crew I worked with were good men, honest, hard-working folks who didn't ask too many questions about why a former ranch manager was swinging a hammer for $12 an hour. But every evening, covered in sawdust and concrete dust, I felt further from the man I used to be. The worst part was the dreams. Every night, I'd dream I was back on the ranch. I'd wake up reaching for my boots, ready to check the morning feed, only to remember where I was. The disappointment hit fresh each time, like losing Dad all over again. I was angry, broke, and more lost than I'd ever been. But I wasn't ready to give up yet. Something about Sarah's words that day kept nagging at me. The truth about what our family really is. The call came on a Tuesday night while I was heating up another frozen dinner. Sarah's name on my phone screen made me hesitate. We hadn't spoken since that day in the parking lot. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in my gut told me to answer. "Jake?" Her voice was strained, different. "I need your help." "Help with what?" I tried to keep the bitterness out of my voice, but it crept in anyway. "There are men here, at the ranch. They're not here for the cattle." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. "What kind of men?" "The kind Dad was afraid of." She paused, and I heard a door close in the background. "Jake, I can't handle this alone. I know you hate me right now, but I need you to come home." "Sarah, you're scaring me." "What's going on?" "Remember when we were kids, and Dad would sometimes disappear for days? He'd come back with cash, lots of it. But he'd never explain where he'd been?" I did remember. Mom would get that tight look around her eyes, and Dad would be extra quiet for weeks afterward. We'd assumed it was just ranch business, maybe cattle sales or equipment deals. "Yeah, but it wasn't cattle sales, Jake. Dad was involved in things that made enemies, dangerous enemies. And now they think I know where something is hidden." My blood ran cold. "What kind of something?" "Money, a lot of money. And they think Dad told me where it is before he died." Her voice broke slightly. "But he didn't, Jake. He didn't tell me anything. And these men, they're not going to believe me." I was already reaching for my keys. "I'm coming home." "Jake, wait. There's something else you need to know first." "Dad wasn't just a rancher," Sarah said, her words coming fast now. "For 15 years, he was laundering money for the Castellano family out of Kansas City. The ranch was perfect cover. Cash business, remote location, plenty of places to hide things." I sat down hard on my couch, the phone pressed to my ear. That's impossible. Dad was the most honest man I knew. He was honest about everything except this. Jake, he started when Mom got sick. The medical bills were crushing us, and someone approached him with an offer. Just move some money around, let them use the ranch for storage occasionally, keep quiet. Easy money for a desperate man. The room was spinning. Every memory of Dad was shifting, taking on new meaning. His mysterious trips, the sudden improvements to the ranch infrastructure, the way he always paid cash for everything. How do you know all this? Because he told me, right before he died. He said the Castellanos had been pressuring him to expand the operation, but he wanted out. He'd been skimming money for years, building a nest egg to disappear if things went bad. $3 million, Jake, hidden somewhere on the ranch. $3 million. And he never told them where it was? He died before he could. The cancer took him faster than anyone expected. Now they think he passed the information to family, and since I inherited the ranch, she trailed off. They think you have it. The pieces were falling into place. That's why Dad cut me out. He was protecting me. He knew they'd come eventually. He thought if only one of us knew about the money, the other would be safe. But Jake, he never told me where it is. I've been searching for months, and these men are getting impatient. How long do we have? They gave me until Friday to find it. That's 3 days. The drive back to Broken Creek Ranch felt like traveling through a time warp. Every mile brought back memories I'd been trying to forget. The old oak tree where Dad taught me to shoot. The creek where Sarah and I caught crawfish as kids. The hill where we'd scattered Mom's ashes 15 years ago. But now, everything looked different through the lens of what I knew. The ranch wasn't just our family home, it was a crime scene. Every building, every pasture could be hiding evidence of Dad's double life. The man I'd idolized, whose approval I'd spent my entire adult life trying to earn, had been living a lie. I pulled up to the main house just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded me of countless evenings spent on this same porch with Dad, talking about cattle prices and weather patterns. Sarah emerged before I'd even turned off the engine, and I was shocked by how different she looked. The polished city lawyer was gone, replaced by someone who looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. "Thank God you came," she said, wrapping me in a hug that felt desperate. "Tell me about these men. How many? What do they look like?" "3 of them. The leader calls himself Vincent. Expensive suit, cold eyes. The other 2 are muscle. They don't talk much, but they don't need to. They've been here twice this week, each time less patient than the last." We walked toward the house, and I noticed new security cameras mounted near the front door. "You installed those?" "Vincent's idea. He wants to make sure I don't run." She laughed bitterly. "As if I could. They made it very clear what happens to people who try to disappear with Castellano money." "We'll find it," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Dad was smart. If he hid $3 million, he left us clues. We started in Dad's study, the room where he'd spent countless hours managing ranch business and apparently much more. Sarah had already been through his desk, but we went through it again together, looking for anything that might point us toward the hidden money. "Look at this," Sarah said, holding up an old leather journal. "I found it last week, but I couldn't make sense of it." The journal was filled with Dad's handwriting, but instead of normal ranch records, it contained cryptic notes and numbers. Fence post 47, needs repair. North pasture gate, rusted latch. Old barn foundation, settling issues. These aren't maintenance notes, I realized. Dad never wrote down stuff like this. He kept it all in his head. That's what I thought. But look at the dates. These entries go back 5 years, and they're all about specific locations on the ranch. I studied the entries more carefully. Fence post 47 was in the far northeast corner, near the old homestead ruins. The north pasture gate was close to where Dad used to take me hunting as a kid. The old barn foundation was from the original structure that burned down in the 50s. He was making a map, I said slowly. Not for us, but for himself. Insurance, in case something happened to him. We spent the next hour plotting the locations on a ranch map Sarah had found in Dad's filing cabinet. The pattern that emerged was strange. The locations formed a rough circle around the property, with one point conspicuously missing. There, I pointed to the gap in the pattern. The old storm cellar behind the main house. Mom used to store her preserves there before she got sick. Sarah's eyes widened. I haven't been down there in years. Dad always said it was too dangerous, that the stairs were rotting. Maybe that was the point. The storm cellar's wooden doors were exactly as I remembered them. Weathered gray planks that creaked ominously when we pulled them open. The smell that rose from below was musty and damp, mixed with something else I couldn't identify. Sarah shined her flashlight down the stone steps, revealing walls lined with empty mason jars and old farming equipment. Dad was right about the stairs, she muttered as we descended carefully. Several of the wooden steps sagged under our weight, and I could see daylight through gaps in the stone foundation. But at the bottom, something was different from what I remembered. The back wall, which used to be lined with Mom's canning supplies, was now bare except for a newer-looking section of stonework that didn't match the rest. That wall's been rebuilt, I said, running my hands over the mismatched stones. Recently, too. Look at the mortar. It's still relatively fresh. Sarah aimed her light at the wall while I examined it more closely. Behind the stones, I could hear a hollow sound when I tapped. There's definitely space back there. We didn't have proper tools, but I found an old crowbar among the equipment scattered around the cellar. The newer mortar crumbled more easily than I'd expected, and within an hour we'd created a hole large enough to crawl through. On the other side was a small chamber, maybe 6 feet square, carved out of the earth and lined with plastic sheeting. And there, stacked neatly against the far wall, were dozens of metal cash boxes. "Jesus," Sarah whispered. "He really did it." I opened the nearest box with trembling hands. Bundles of $100 bills, wrapped in plastic and labeled with dates going back years. Box after box, all filled with cash. Dad's insurance policy, hidden right under our noses. "We found it," I said. "Now what do we do with it?" Sitting in that hidden chamber, surrounded by $3 million in stolen money, I felt like I was looking into the heart of my father's secret life. Each bundle of cash represented a choice he'd made, a line he'd crossed, a piece of his soul he'd sold to keep our family afloat. "We could just give it to them," Sarah said quietly. "Vincent and his men. Tell them we found it, hand it over, and walk away. And then what? You think they'll just leave us alone? We know too much now." I picked up one of the bundles, feeling the weight of it. "Besides, this isn't just their money. Dad skimmed this over years. Some of it might be legitimately ours. Or it might all be blood money." Sarah's voice was hollow. "Jake, people might have died because of this. Families might have been destroyed." I thought about that. About the victims of whatever crimes this money had funded. About the communities torn apart by drugs and violence. About the children who'd grown up without fathers because of operations like the one Dad had been part of. But I also thought about Mom's medical bills, about the ranch improvements that had kept us competitive, about the college fund that had paid for Sarah's law degree. How much of our lives had been built on this foundation of crime? "There's a third option," I said finally. "We don't give it to the Castellanos, and we don't keep it for ourselves." "What do you mean?" "We make it right. Use the money to help the people who were hurt by whatever Dad was involved in. Find a way to give it back to the communities that were damaged." Sarah stared at me. "That's incredibly noble and incredibly stupid. These aren't people who negotiate, Jake. They kill people who cross them." "Then we'd better be smart about how we do this." We had less than 24 hours before Vincent's deadline, and we needed a plan that would keep us alive while doing the right thing. Sitting in Dad's study, surrounded by maps and notebooks, we worked through our options. "The key is making them think they're getting what they want," I said, sketching out ideas on a legal pad. We give them some of the money, enough to satisfy them, but not all of it. How do we explain only finding part of it? We tell them Dad was smarter than they thought, that he split the money into multiple hiding places and we've only found one so far. We give them $1 million, keep them happy, and promise to find the rest. Sarah shook her head. They'll never believe that. And even if they do, they'll never leave us alone as long as they think there's more money out there. She was right. I stared out the window at the pasture where I'd spent so many mornings, watching the sun rise over land that had been in our family for 3 generations. There had to be another way. What if we don't give them the money at all? I said slowly. What if we give them something better? Like what? Information. Dad kept records, right? Names, dates, transactions. If he was laundering money for 15 years, he had to have detailed records for his own protection. We find those records and offer them a trade. Trade for what? Our lives. And a clean break. We give them everything Dad knew about their operation. Names, accounts, methods. Enough information to clean up any loose ends and make sure no one else comes looking for this money. In exchange, they walk away and leave us alone. And the money? Disappears. Just like Dad always planned. Vincent arrived exactly at noon, just as he'd promised. I watched from the kitchen window as 3 black SUVs pulled up the gravel drive, kicking up dust clouds that drifted across the pasture. My hands were shaking as I poured coffee, trying to look casual while my heart hammered against my ribs. Sarah met them at the front door, and I could hear Vincent's voice through the walls, smooth, cultured, and absolutely cold. Ms. Morrison, I trust you have good news for me. We found something, Sarah said, leading them into the living room. But it's not what you expected. I entered carrying a tray of coffee, playing the role of the helpful brother. Vincent was exactly as Sarah had described. Expensive suit, silver hair, eyes like winter ice. His 2 companions flanked him silently, their hands never far from their jackets. Mr. Morrison, Vincent said, accepting a cup. I understand you've decided to join our little treasure hunt. Family business, I replied simply. Sarah placed Dad's leather journal on the coffee table between us. Our father was more careful than you knew. He didn't just hide the money. He documented everything. Every transaction, every contact, every detail of his relationship with your organization. Vincent's expression didn't change, but I saw his fingers tighten slightly on his coffee cup. I'm listening. $3 million in cash, yes. But also 15 years of records that could destroy your entire operation if they fell into the wrong hands. Sarah opened the journal, showing pages of Dad's coded entries. Names, dates, amounts, everything. What do you want? Vincent asked quietly. A trade, I said. The money and the records in exchange for a guarantee that you'll walk away and never contact our family again. And if I refuse? Then you get nothing, and these records find their way to the FBI. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Vincent studied the journal pages while his men shifted restlessly behind him. Outside, I could hear the familiar sounds of the ranch, cattle lowing in the distance, wind through the wheat, the creak of the old windmill by the barn, sounds that might be the last I'd ever hear if this went wrong. Finally, Vincent closed the journal and looked up at us. You're either very brave or very foolish, possibly both. We're just trying to clean up our father's mess, Sarah said. Vincent stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the pasture where Dad's prize bull was grazing peacefully. Your father was a good partner for many years, reliable, discreet, profitable. It's unfortunate that greed got the better of him in the end. It wasn't greed, I said. It was guilt. He wanted out, and he was building an escape fund. Perhaps. Vincent turned back to us. Very well. Show me the money, and we have a deal. An hour later, we stood in the storm cellar as Vincent's men loaded metal boxes into their vehicles. True to our word, we'd given them everything, the cash, The records, even Dad's journal. Vincent had examined each box carefully, counting bundles with the efficiency of a banker. "This concludes our business," he said, as his men finished loading. "You'll never see me again, and I trust the feeling is mutual." After they left, Sarah and I sat on the front porch, watching the dust settle on the gravel drive. The ranch was quiet again, peaceful in a way it hadn't been for months. "So what now?" Sarah asked. I looked out at the land that had shaped me, the home I'd thought I'd lost forever. "Now we figure out how to be a family again."